Hello, this is Morel Benard with the continuing story of Lady Chatterley's lover. Yes, Lady Chatterley's lover. So the last words were, "Lie down, then," he said, when he stood in his shirt. She obeyed in silence, and he lay beside her and pulled the blanket over them both. "There," he said, and he lifted her dress right back, till he came even to her breast. He kissed them softly, taking the nipples in his lips in tiny caresses. "Hey, but they're nice. That's nice," he said, suddenly rubbing his face with a snuggling movement against her warm belly. And she put her arms round him under his shirt, but she was afraid of his thin, smooth, naked body that seemed so powerful, afraid of the violent muscles. She shrank, afraid. And when he said with a sort of little sigh, that nice," something in her quivered, and something in her spirit stiffened in resistance, stiffened from the terribly physical intimacy and from the peculiar haste of his possession. And this time the sharp ecstasy of her own passion did not overcome her. She lay with her ends inert on his striving body, and do what she might, her spirit seemed to look on from the top of her head, and the butting of his haunches seemed ridiculous to her, and the sort of anxiety of his penis to come to its little evacuating crisis seemed farcical. Yes, this was love. This ridiculous bouncing of the buttocks and the wilting of the poor, insignificant, moist little penis. This was the divine love. After all, the moderns were right when they felt contempt for the performance, for it was a performance. It was quite true, as some poet said, that the God who created man must have had a sinister sense of humour, creating him a reasonable being, yet forcing him to take this ridiculous posture, and driving him with blind craving for this ridiculous performance. Even a mors passant found it a humiliating anticlimax. Men despised the intercourse act, and yet they did it. Cold and derisive, a queer female mind stood apart. And though she lay perfectly still, her impulse was to heave her loins and throw the man out, escape his ugly grip and the butting overriding of his absurd haunches. His body was a foolish, impudent, imperfect thing, a little disgusting in its unfinished clumsiness. Surely, a complete evolution would eliminate this performance, this function. And yet, when he had finished, soon over, and lay very still, receding into silence in a strange, motionless distance, farther than the horizon of her awareness, her heart began to weep. She could feel him ebbing away, leaving her there like a stone on the shore. He was withdrawing. His spirit was leaving her. He knew. And in a real grief, tormented by her own double consciousness and reaction, she began to weep. He took no notice, or did not even know. The storm of weeping swelled and shook her and shook him. "Hey," he said, "it was no good that time. You wasn't there." So he knew. Her sobs became violent. "But what's amiss?" he said. "It's once in a while that way. I can't love you," she sobbed, suddenly feeling her heart breaking. "Canada? Well, don't fret. There's no law says as that's got to. That it for what it is. He still lay with his hand on her breast, but she had drawn both her hands from him. His words were small comfort. She sobbed aloud. "Nay, nay," he said. "Take the thick with the thin. This was a bit of thin for once." She wept bitterly, sobbing. "But I want to love you, and I can't. It only seems horrid." He laughed a little, half bitter, half amused. "It isn't horrid," he said, "even if they think it is, and thou cannot make it horrid. Don't fret thyself about loving me. Thou'll never force thyself to. There's sure to be a bad nut in a basket full. Thou must take the rough with the smooth." He took his hand away from her breast, not touching her. And now she was untouched. She took an almost perverse satisfaction in it. She hated the dialect, the thee and the thyson. He could get up if he liked and stand there above her, buttoning down those absurd corduroy breeches straight in front of her. After all, Michaelese had had the decency to turn away. This man was so assured in himself he didn't know what a clown other people found him, a half-bred fellow. Yet, as he was drawing away to rise silently and leave her, she clung to him in terror. Don't go. Don't leave me. Don't be cross with me. Hold me fast." She whispered in blind frenzy, not even knowing what she said, and clinging to him with uncanny force. It was from herself she wanted to be saved, from her own inward anger and resistance, yet how powerful was that inward resistance that possessed her. He took her in his arms again and threw her to him. And suddenly she became small in his arms, small and nestling. It was gone. The resistance was gone, and she began to melt in a marvelous peace. And as she melted small and wonderful in his arms, she became infinitely desirable to him. All his blood vessels seemed to scald with intense yet tender desire for her softness, for the penetrating beauty of her in his arms, passing into his blood. And softly, with that marvellous swoon-like caress of his hand in pure soft desire, softly he stroked the silky slope of her loins, down, down, between her soft, warm buttocks, coming nearer and nearer to the very quick of her. And she felt him like a flame of desire, yet tender, and she felt herself melting in the flame. She let herself go. She felt his penis risen against her with silent, amazing force and assertion, and she let herself go to him. She yielded with a quiver that was like death, and she went all open to him, and oh, if he were not tender to her now, how cruel, for she was all open to him and helpless. She quivered again at the potent, inexorable entry inside her, so strange and terrible. It might come with a thrust of a sword in her softly open body, and that would be death. She clung in a sudden anguish of terror, but it came with a strange, slow thrust of peace, the dark thrust of peace and a ponderous, primordial tenderness, such as made the world in the beginning. And her terror subsided in her breast. Her breast dared to be gone in peace. She held nothing. She dared to let go everything, all herself, and be gone in the flood. And it seemed she was like the sea, nothing but dark waves rising and heaving with a great swell, so that slowly her whole darkness was in motion, and she was ocean rolling its dark, dumb mass. Oh, And far down inside her the deeps parted and rolled asunder in long, fair, travelling billows, and ever quicker. The depths parted and rolled asunder from the centre of soft plunging, as the plunger went deeper and deeper, touching lower, and she was deeper and deeper and deeper disclosed. The heavier the billows of her rolled away to some shore, uncovering her, and closer plunged the palpable unknown, and further rolled the waves of herself away from herself, leaving her, till suddenly, in a soft, shuddering convulsion, the quick of all her spasm was touch. She knew herself touched. The consummation was upon her, and she was gone, she was not, and she was born a woman. Ah, too lovely, too lovely. In the ebbing she realized all the loveliness. Now all her body clung with tender love to the unknown man, and blindly to the wilting penis, as it so tenderly, frailly, unknowingly withdrew out of the fierce thrust of its potency. As it drew out and left her body, the secret, sensitive thing, she gave an unconscious cry of pure loss, and she tried to put it back. It had been so perfect, and she loved it so. And only now she became aware of the small bud-like reticence and tenderness of the penis, and a little cry of wonder and poignancy escaped her again, her woman's heart crying out over the tender frailty of that which had been the power. "It was so lovely," she moaned. "It was so lovely." But he said nothing, only softly kissed her, lying still above her, and she moaned with a soft sort of bliss as a sacrifice and a newborn thing. And now in her heart the queer wonder of him was awakened. A man. The strange potency of manhood upon her. Her hand strayed over him, still a little afraid of that strange, hostile, slightly repulsive thing that he had been to her. A man. And now she touched him. And it was the sons of God were the daughters of men. How beautiful he felt, how pure in tissue, how lovely, strong, and yet pure and delicate, such stillness of the sensitive body, such utter stillness of potency and delicate flesh. How beautiful, how beautiful. Her hands came timorously down his back to the soft, smallish globes of his buttocks. Beauty. What beauty! A sudden little flame of new awareness went through her. How was it possible, this beauty here, where she had previously only been repelled? The unspeakable beauty to the touch of the warm, living buttocks. The life within life, the sheer, warm, potent loveliness, and the strange weight of the balls between his legs. What a mystery! What a strange heavy weight of mystery that could lie soft and heavy in one's hand. The root of all that is lovely, the primeval root of all full beauty. She clung to him with a hiss of wonder that was almost awe, terror. He held her close, but he said nothing. He would never say anything. She crept nearer to him, nearer, only to be near to the sensual wonder of him. And out of his utter, incomprehensible stillness, she felt again the slow, momentous surging rise of the phallus again, the other power, and her heart melted out with a kind of awe. And this time, his being within her was all soft and iridescent, purely soft and iridescent, such as no consciousness could seize. Her whole self quivered unconscious and alive, like spasm. She could not know what it was. She could not remember what it had been, only that it had been more lovely than anything ever could be, only that. And afterwards she was utterly still, utterly unknowing. She was not aware for how long, and he was still with her. And in an unfathomable silence along with her, and of this they would never speak. When awareness of the outside began to come back, she clung to his breast, murmuring, "My love, my love." And he held her silently, and she curled on his breast perfect. But his silence was fathomless. His hands held her like flowers, so still, aid strange. "Where are you?" she whispered to him. "Where are you? Speak to me, say something to me." He kissed her softly, murmuring, "I am, alas." But she did not know what he meant. She did not know where he was. In his silence he seemed lost to her. "You love me, don't you?" she murmured. "Aye, that knows," he said. "But tell me," she pleaded. "Aye, has felt it," he said dimply, but softly and surely, and she clung close to him, closer. He was so much more peaceful in love than she was, and she wanted him to reassure her. "You do love me," she whispered, assertive, and his hands stroked her softly, as if she were a flower, without the quiver of desire, but with delicate nearness, and still there haunted her a restless necessity to get a grip on love. "Say you'll always love me," she pleaded. "Aye," he said, abstractedly. And she felt her questions driving him away from her. "Mustn't we get up?" he said at last. "No," she said. But she could feel his consciousness strain, listening to the noises outside. "It'll be nearly dark," he said, and she heard the pressure of circumstances in his voice. She kissed him with a woman's grief at yielding up her hour. He rose and turned up the lantern, then began to pull on his clothes, quickly disappearing inside them. Then he stood there above her, fastening his breeches and looking down at her with dark, wide eyes, his face a little flushed and his hair ruffled, curiously warm and still and beautiful in the dim light of the lantern, so beautiful. She would never tell him how beautiful. It made her want to cling fast to him, to hold him, for there was a warm, half-sleepy remoteness in his beauty that made her want to cry out and clutch him, to have him. She would never have him. So she lay on the blanket with curved, soft, naked haunches, and he had no idea what she was thinking. But to him too she was beautiful, the soft, marvellous thing he could go into, beyond everything. "I love thee that I call, go into thee," he said. "Do you like me?" she said, her heart beating. "It heals it all up that I can go into thee. I love thee, that opened to me. I love thee that I came into thee like that." He bent down and kissed her soft flank, rubbed his cheek against it, then covered it up. "And will you never leave me?" she said. "Don't ask them things," he said. "But you do believe I love you," she said. "That loved me just now? Wider than river than thou wert? But who knows what happened once I start thinking about it? No, don't say those things. And you don't really think that I wanted to make use of you, do you?" "How?" "To have a child?" "Now, anybody can have a child in the world," he said, as he sat down fastening on his leggings. "I know," she cried. "You don't mean it." Well," he said, looking at her under his brows. "This works best. She lay still. He softly opened the door. The sky was dark blue with crystalline turquoise rim. He went out to shut up the hens, speaking softly to his dog. And she lay and wondered at the wonder of life and of beginning. When he came back, she was still lying there, glowing like a gypsy. He sat on the stool by her. The monk come out might the cottage afore that goes, Shula? He asked, lifting his eyebrows as he looked at her, his hands dangling between his knees. Shulter? She echoed, teasing. He smiled. Aye, Shulter, he repeated. Aye, she said, imitating the dialect sound. Yeah, he said. Yeah, she repeated. And sleep with me, he said. It needs that. When shalt come? When shall I come? She said. Nay, he said, that cannot do it. When shalt come then? Upon Sunday, she said. Upon a Sunday, eh? He laughed at her quickly. Nay, that cannot be protested. Why can I? She said. We'll leave that there. Listen. That was all dialect, by the way. Listen to the next episode of Lady Chatterley's Lover. The next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Listen to the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover coming soon. Bye for now, Morel Benard. Say bye for now.